A 29-year-old woman stood between the most powerful man in Rome and a secret that could destroy empires. What happened in the next 365 days would end 3 lives, topple a dynasty, and unleash a reign of terror that historians still whisper about today. This is the forbidden love story Roman senators tried to erase from every scroll, every monument, every memory, a tale so scandalous that even speaking her name became dangerous. Her crime was loving too deeply, her punishment, death by the very hands that once caressed her. But before the screams, before the blood, before Rome burned, there was desire. What you're about to hear is recorded in the writings of Tacitus Suetonius and Cassius Dio, historians who lived through or just after these events between 58 and 65 AD, verified by archaeological evidence unearthed in 1952 beneath Nero's palace. These truths were buried in plain sight for nearly 2,000 years, her 50 AD waned. AD across the empire, from Britain's fog-covered forests to Egypt's sun-scorched sands. One name commanded absolute obedience: Nero Caesar Augustus. The marble city glimmered beneath the Mediterranean sun. The air was thick with the scent of olive oil, roasting meat, and the sweat of 1 million people pressed between the 7 hills. In the shadow of the Palatine Hill, where emperors drowned in obscene luxury, the air itself vibrated with conspiracy. This was the Rome of excess and paranoia, a city where senators smiled while plotting murder, wives poisoned husbands over breakfast, and gladiators died for entertainment, while nobles applauded between bites of peacock tongue. And in this world of elegant cruelty, one woman was about to become both the most desired and the most dangerous soul alive. She entered rooms like fire entering a temple of dry wood. Her name was Poppaea Sabina, 30 years old in 62 AD. Though some claimed she was younger, Poppaea possessed what chroniclers described as every gift except an honest soul. Her cascading auburn hair caught the light like burnished copper. Her skin was said to glow because she bathed in the milk of 500 donkeys. Her eyes, dark, deliberate, could command armies or seduce emperors with a single glance. Born noble but raised on ambition, she craved what Roman women were never allowed to want: power without a man's name attached. Her greatest fear wasn't death. It was being forgotten, becoming ordinary, just another pretty face in Rome's endless parade of beauty. Yet she could still feel. Witnesses said she wept at tragic plays, betraying a heart that could ache even while she plotted her next move. Her husband, Marcus Salvius Otho, 27, handsome in that senatorial way, had inherited wealth and rank from his father. He loved Poppaea with the desperate intensity of a man who knew she was far beyond his grasp. He wanted her loyalty, her full attention. Her love returned in equal measure. What he feared most was exactly what destiny held, and towering above them both stood Nero, 21 years old, the 5th Emperor of Rome, a man-child with limitless power and no restraint. Red-faced, thick-necked, he fancied himself a singer and poet, though most found his voice unbearable. He longed to be adored as an artist, yet was feared as a tyrant. He performed on stage while his mother Agrippina schemed in the dark. He wrote poetry while his citizens starved. And what Nero desired most was Poppaea Sabina. Marriage in imperial Rome was never about love. It was about alliances, property, and bloodlines. Divorce required only a spoken declaration, but divorcing to steal another man's wife, when that man was your friend and that woman already married, when your own wife was the daughter of a murdered emperor, that required either madness or obsession. No one knew that what began as an affair would end in infanticide, matricide, and flames that would swallow half of Rome. It began innocently, if anything around Nero could be called innocent. The year was 58 AD. Otho, ambitious and naive, introduced his radiant wife to the emperor during a private banquet. He wanted favor, advancement, imperial attention. He wanted Nero to see what a remarkable woman he had married. He got his wish and lost everything. If only Otho had known that a single evening's vanity would cost him his marriage, his dignity, and nearly his life. The banquet hall shimmered with golden inlay, hundreds of oil lamps reflecting off polished marble. Incense drifted, frankincense from Arabia, myrrh from Ethiopia, cinnamon from India. Silk cushions imported at ruinous expense lined the couches. Wine worth a soldier's yearly pay flowed freely. Nero reclined lazily, nibbling roasted dormice as musicians plucked lyres in the corner. Then Poppaea Sabina entered. The room changed. Conversations broke mid-sentence. Even the music faltered. She wore silk the color of fresh blood, shoulders bare, a style that would have scandalized her ancestors, but now held every gaze captive. Her perfume, a blend of roses and saffron, arrived 3 steps before she did. Nero's eyes found her, and never left. The fuse had been lit. Admiration would soon become obsession. Obsession would ignite violence, and that violence would be etched into history. The marriage happened first. 12 days after the divorce, Nero and Poppaea were wed in a ceremony that mocked every Roman tradition. The Senate, cowed into silence, approved the union. Statues of Octavia were quietly removed from temples, her name erased from prayers, her face scratched off coins. For the Roman people, it was an act of betrayal. For Nero, it was liberation. For Poppaea, it was triumph, at least for now. But the whispers never stopped. Senators muttered that she had bewitched the emperor, that her beauty had driven him mad, that no woman could rise so high without sorcery. And the people, those fickle masses who once adored Octavia, now despised Poppaea. Crowds still gathered at night outside the palace, chanting the name of the exiled empress. Nero's paranoia grew by the day. He ordered spies into every corner of Rome. Those who spoke of Octavia vanished. Then, in a single stroke of cruelty, he ended all doubt about his capacity for evil. On June 9, 62 AD, Nero commanded Octavia's execution. The pretext was treason. The reality, revenge. She was taken to the island of Pandateria, the same barren rock where imperial women were sent to disappear. There, the young woman who had once been empress of the world's greatest empire was suffocated by her own attendants under imperial orders. Her head was sent to Poppaea as proof. That moment changed everything. Nero, for the first time, had killed someone beloved by the Roman people. Poppaea, once adored by the emperor, now became the most hated woman in Rome. Her victory was poisoned by guilt and fear. Even Tacitus, no friend to women, wrote that Octavia's death turned public hatred from Nero's cruelty to Poppaea's influence. But Poppaea didn't care. She had what she wanted, the title of Augusta, Empress of Rome. She ruled beside Nero for the next 3 years, not just as consort, but as co-sovereign. Her seal appeared on decrees. Ambassadors bowed to her. Even senators addressed her as Domina. Behind the curtains of Nero's golden palace, she whispered policy into his ear. Foreign alliances, appointments, punishments, and then the prophecy began to unfold. Poppaea gave birth to a daughter, Claudia Augusta, in 63 AD. Nero declared her divine at birth. Statues were raised in her honor. Coins were minted with her image, but within 4 months the infant died suddenly, of unknown causes, according to court physicians. Nero wept publicly, ordered massive games in her memory, and deified the child. Poppaea withdrew into isolation. Her grief mixed with growing dread. Those who served her claimed she began seeing omens, blood on her mirror, voices in the night, shadows that whispered her name. The emperor's moods darkened too. His love turned to suspicion, then to rage. He accused Poppaea of plotting to control him, of poisoning his mind against his advisors, of mocking his art. By 65 AD, Rome itself reflected Nero's madness. The Great Fire broke out that summer, raging for 9 days, consuming 2/3 of the city. Rumors spread that Nero himself had ordered it to clear space for his new palace, the Domus Aurea, and that he had watched the inferno while playing his lyre. To deflect blame, he accused Christians of arson and unleashed the first great persecution in history. Through it all, Poppaea remained at his side, but the empire was collapsing around them. Famine followed fire. Rebellions spread across the provinces. The Senate plotted in silence, and Nero's temper, always volatile, finally became lethal. In the spring of 65 AD, an argument erupted between Nero and Poppaea. Ancient sources differ on the cause. Some say jealousy, others politics, but all agree on what happened next. She was pregnant again, 8 months along. In a fit of rage, Nero struck her across the abdomen with his foot. The blow killed both mother and child instantly. The palace went silent. No one dared move. Nero stared at her body for a long moment before walking out. Days later, he announced that Poppaea had died from a sudden illness. Her funeral was extravagant beyond belief. Nero himself delivered the eulogy, calling her divine, ordering her embalmed with spices of Arabia, and entombing her in the mausoleum of Augustus, a privilege reserved for emperors. Historians say he had her body treated with rare ointments so that it would not decay, and that he visited her tomb for years afterward, whispering apologies into the marble silence. The affair that began with a dinner invitation had ended with a kick. By 68 AD, Nero himself was dead, driven to suicide by rebellion, abandoned by his guards, muttering his final words, "What an artist dies in me." But the legend of Poppaea lived on. To some, she was the ultimate temptress who brought an empire to ruin. To others, a victim of the same monstrous man she once thought she could control. And the question that haunts history remains: was she the cause of Nero's madness, or merely its most tragic casualty? She became Empress of Rome at age 30, after maneuvering past 2 husbands and 1 innocent wife, to claim the most powerful position any woman could ever hold. She had won. But victory demanded one final, unforgivable act. The exiled Empress, Octavia, had been sent to Campania. But even in exile, she remained a threat. The people still adored her. Senators still whispered her name. As long as Octavia lived, Poppaea's throne was never secure. And so, according to every ancient account, Poppaea demanded action, and Nero obeyed. The orders went out on June 9, 62 AD. Centurions arrived at Octavia's villa. The 22-year-old girl, for she was little more than that, understood immediately why they had come. Witnesses said she didn't beg. She didn't scream. She only said softly, "I am no longer Nero's wife, only his sister. The truth should protect me, it didn't." They opened her veins in the bath, the traditional Roman method. The water turned red. She died watching her blood swirl away, taking with it her father's dynasty, her innocence, and her 22 short years of life. Her severed head was brought to Rome and presented to Poppaea as proof. The empire held its breath, and then the storm broke. But the retribution didn't fall on Nero. It fell on anyone who had dared support Octavia. Senators who had spoken her name were exiled. Servants who had once attended her were executed. Even citizens who protested too loudly vanished in the night. Cassius Dio, writing a century later, said this moment marked Nero's true descent into tyranny. Before Octavia's death, he was merely indulgent. After it, he became monstrous. Poppaea had her crown, but the price was only beginning to reveal itself. The murder shocked even Rome's jaded aristocracy. Octavia had been beloved, innocent, and imperial by birth. Her execution on fabricated adultery charges that nobody believed proved something terrifying. No one was safe. Not bloodline, not virtue, not popularity. Fear replaced whatever affection had remained for Nero. Senators attended palace banquets because refusing meant death. The Senate rubber-stamped every decree because dissent meant exile. The people stopped protesting because protesters were crucified. Rome had become a city of whispers and suspicion. Were Nero and Poppaea guilty? Unquestionably. But understanding isn't the same as forgiving. Nero had been raised in a world where his mother, Agrippina, murdered her husband to make her son emperor, where uncles poisoned nephews, where mercy was weakness and survival required cruelty. Poppaea had grown up in a world where women had no power except through men, no security except through manipulation, no legacy except through alliance. Imagine Poppaea's realization that her greatest victory required her to become the very monster she once feared, that the crown she schemed for was welded to her skull with innocent blood. Centuries later, historians still debate who she really was, a victim of circumstance or a calculating murderer. In 1952, archaeologists excavating beneath Rome's Oppian Hill unearthed the remains of Nero's Domus Aurea, the golden house he built after the Great Fire. Among the ruins, they found inscriptions naming Poppaea, coins bearing her likeness, and evidence of her infamous donkey milk baths. Dr. Maria Antonietta Toei, who led the excavation, confirmed that Poppaea had indeed lived in unimaginable luxury. Chemical analysis of residue in the palace plumbing revealed traces consistent with milk proteins, confirming the ancient accounts of her extravagant beauty rituals. But the most chilling revelation came later. In 1964, researchers at the University of Rome compared Tacitus and Suetonius's writings with archaeological data. The result? Every major event, the affair, the divorce, Octavia's execution, Poppaea's coronation, aligned perfectly with dated artifacts. The story wasn't exaggerated. If anything, ancient historians had softened the truth. Modern scholars still argue about Poppaea's agency. Professor Anthony Barrett calls her ambitious but not unusually cruel for her age. Professor Miriam Griffin insists she actively manipulated Nero toward murder. The truth likely lies between both victim of her world and architect of her fate. Poppaea inspired Monteverdi's 1643 opera L'Incoronazione di Poppaea, appears in Henryk Sienkiewicz's Quo Vadis, and continues to be portrayed as Rome's most dangerous beauty, the woman who brought an empire to its knees. But why does she still matter? Because her story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ambition, gender, and power. Her tragedy teaches that desire without conscience becomes destruction. Poppaea sought power in a world that denied women power. Her methods were monstrous, but her motivation was survival in a system that left her no other tools. Power corrupted both of them, but in different ways. Nero, who could have any woman, destroyed himself taking one. Poppaea, who could have had safety, destroyed herself reaching for a crown. It shows how ambition carries its own punishment. She schemed for 3 years to become empress, and ruled for exactly 3 before it killed her. What other secrets still lie buried beneath palace marble? How many innocent Octavias died for one guilty Poppaea's ambition? When does love become dangerous? When it demands everything or when it's denied nothing? Imagine Poppaea's horror as she realized her triumph was hollow, that she had become the most hated woman in Rome, blamed for every murder she had inspired, trapped beside a man unraveling into madness. Her beauty fading, her legacy sealed, not as queen but as caution. She learned too late that she had traded her soul for a crown, and the crown was made of thorns. A dinner party had become 3 murders and the collapse of an empire's conscience. One woman's ambition cost Otho his dignity, Octavia her life and Rome its morality. And Poppaea herself? In 65 AD, just 3 years after becoming empress, she was dead. Some say Nero, in a fit of rage, kicked her while she was pregnant. Others claim she died giving birth. Either way, the woman who schemed her way to power died at 33, buried with imperial honors by the same man who likely killed her. If this story left you questioning what you'd sacrifice for power, subscribe, because next week we uncover the darker legend of Messalina, the empress who made Poppaea look like an amateur.